Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Day 2 of AUSA 2023 Warriors Corner. Presenting first, we have TRADOC, helping commanders build cohesive teams.
Okay, hey, good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody had a good night's sleep and you were exercising your domains within H2F to recover. Oh, some are actually working out. Hey, first of all, thank you all for coming this morning. I'm really fired up and excited about what we're doing within the Cohesion Assistance Team. And so if you're a little bit confused as to what that is, hopefully you can help spread the word on what we're doing in the prevention area. What I'd like to do, though, before I start getting to the slides, is just kind of describe a little bit about what we do within CIMT to set the stage, because I think it's important. Some of you may be asking, why is the Cohesion Assistance Team within the Center for Initial Military Training, those individuals that are in charge of basic training and drill sergeants academies and things like that? So I'll kind of share with you why this kind of came about. Within CIMT, we do those things that I just mentioned, but we also have oversight of holistic health and fitness. And here recently, the Secretary of the Army signed a memorandum that assigned the prevention, force modernization proponent for prevention down to TRADOC, which was further delegated down to CIMT. Now, that's going to be a little bit of time in making in terms of when we start to hire people and when we become FOC. But in the interim, we received this particular resource, the Cohesion. Then it was called the Assessment Team. Now it is the Assistance Team. And it kind of serves as our scouts in the prevention area. It goes out to kind of help units out. So I'll describe that here momentarily, but I wanted to set the stage a little bit so you kind of understand it. If you also consider this, within CIMT, we have the opportunity to really influence the values and the character and the culture of our Army, because we get to see individuals as soon as they come in through the MEP station, and we get to start to make an impression on what it means to soldier in our Army. And so through our drill sergeants and through our cadre, we have this opportunity to kind of shape the future soldier of the Army. And we take great pride in that. And so there's a lot that's associated with culture when you look at what we do within CIMT. And we get to show them kind of what right looks like in the beginning, and you also get to show them one of our most phenomenal resources, which is H2F, and that also helps to influence as well. So that's kind of the reason why the prevention is kind of coming within the CIMT arena. And then the last thing I'll say is, with it being within TRADOC, we get to institutionalize it, which is so important. Now we get to introduce it into doctrine. We get to shape things like BCAP, CCAP, FM 6-22. You think about all the things that we can do within NCOES and PME. We get to do those things to kind of shape it for the Army, those lessons learned. So if we go to the first slide here, we're going to do a little bit of history here. Then the Cohesion Assessment Team was born as a result of the Fort Hood Independent Review, right? And we're all familiar with that. And at the time, the People First Task Force, Major General Chris Norrie, was given a directive to stand up a team so we could go look at units out there and see if there were other similar, like type, high-risk indicators in other formations. And then that way we could get ahead of it and maybe hopefully prevent something unfortunate from happening again. And so this was directed from the Department of the Army, and this team would go out and it would go look at units that were selected kind of through the Headquarters Department of the Army G1 and the People First Task Force, and then they would bring that information back after they looked at like 33 different metrics, spent some time on the ground. They'd bring that information back and inform Army senior leadership so they would have a better understanding of what was going on within particular formations and start to get some understanding of the themes that were taking place out there. You fast forward about last October, the People First Task Force was doing great work. They were kind of accomplishing all the tasks that came out in the independent review, and they needed to transition the CAT. And I think you'll find out there that there was some testimony that was given by our secretary and that she states that she's going to keep the CAT. And so we inherited it. It was about October. I saw one unit get looked at, and we became IOC as we were kind of forming a team. We briefed the vice and the under. We said, hey, we'd like to make this permanent structure. What we don't want to do is kind of do the ad hoc nature that it's been doing previously. That being, not that it was not effective, but it's a little bit tough to maintain continuity when you're trying to receive team members that are coming throughout FORCECOM train them up real fast, go look at a unit, come back, disassemble, and then repeat all over again. And so it was approved by the Department of the Army to authorize 13 positions for the Cohesion Assistance Team. And so all those individuals arrived this summer, of which Colonel Bursma is now the lead, and he'll come up here for the Q&A, Jason Bursma. And they arrived this summer, but until this summer, what we were doing is we were using sitting battalion commanders from throughout Forces Command, top draft picks, if you will, to go look at other divisions. No division was looking internally. We were doing it all externally. And so we started to do that in around January. We looked at a unit. We looked at another unit. We do one about every 2 months. And we decided at that point that rather than just go look at a unit and find those things that are challenges and then report back to the Pentagon, it would work better, we think, if we were to stop the outbriefs kind of at the 2-star level. Division commanders, we empower them, we trust them to be able to handle, certainly within their formations. No outbriefs go beyond the 2-star level, so we don't jeopardize the feelings of trust. And we wanted to add a solutions portion to this thing. We didn't want to just find things that are challenges and not offer some assistance. And so it was actually recommended from one of the units that we visited, why don't you call that the Cohesion Assistance Team? And that's what we did. We renamed it. General Brito was instrumental in that and taking it up to the headquarters Department of the Army, and we quickly made the change from assessment to assistance, because we don't want to be viewed as somebody that's coming around and just looking at your stuff. So we'll go to the next slide. Just a simple graphic here with our mission and our end state. But the cool thing about the Cohesion Assistance Team is it's great that we get to help out these battalions in the small tactical level and offer assistance and kind of steer solutions, but it's much bigger than that. So it's useful at the unit level, at the tactical level. I'll talk a little bit about a ripple effect that takes place across a larger formation from lessons learned that we garner from the small units that we look at. And then ultimately what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we're able to carry on these lessons learned for the Army. We want to institutionalize what it is that we are learning. We want to boil down the trends that we're finding down to the root causes and figure out what the solution should be so we can shape the Army for the future. If we could go to the next slide. I think it's important to also understand what we are not. What we do not want to be viewed as is we are some hit squad that's coming out to go look at a unit and just find the challenges that are within a formation. That is not what we do. This is not an inspection. We are not the Inspector General. We are not in that space. In fact, the reason what you won't see is the units that we're going to visit and when we're going to visit them. It's not needed for this conversation. What you will see, though, is what the process is and what we do and what our intended end state is. If we don't leave a unit in a better position than they were before we got there, then we failed in our mission. And I always define success that as soon as a division commander says that, hey, send the cat my way, we want you to take a look at a unit, then we're probably in an area where we've established enough trust that we're kind of in the sweet spot there. If division commanders are shying away from the cat, then we have not achieved trust and it's failing. We are at that point now. But it's always very tenuous, and we have to be very careful about what goes out on social media, and discretion is so important in this business. So this is what we are not. We have been described as kind of like a DEOX, but times 10. That's come out of a couple division commanders' names, mouths, I should say. Because it's a DEOX, if you're not familiar with the Command Climate Survey, we afford the opportunity for the soldiers without attribution to share how they feel about the climate within their organization. And then they also have a portion in there where they can just write down their candid thoughts, quotes, if you will. There's portions in there. And then that's all consolidated, and we get a chance to look at how that unit is performing, specifically in areas like SHARP and EO and in those areas. We also look at demographics and the like. What doesn't happen is a unit doesn't necessarily, or a formation doesn't come down and spend 10 days on the ground doing a variety of focus groups and really getting a good. If we go to the next slide, I think it's worth also mentioning we are partnered with RARE, so Walter Reed, We are also partnered with the Center for Army Leadership out of CAC. So we combined to form a little bit larger team. It's about 20 personnel. And then we've got reach back, of course, through my headquarters and up to HQDA if we're looking at specific problems. The way this kind of works is I will reach out to the division commander first and foremost. I'll send a letter that goes to the division commander. It's about 90 days in advance. Once that's done, I do a one-on-one Teams call with the division commander. And I ask the division commander, hey, we're coming down your way. I want to make sure you understand what it is that we do, but I also want to make sure I understand what it is that you'd like me to look at in addition to what I'm already going to look at. How can I help you within your formation? And so we have a discussion and we write those things down and we start to shape a little bit about our visit and what we're going to look at. That's at the 90 days prior. I will also then do a one-on-one conversation with myself and the brigade commander that we're going to visit. Now that brigade commander is allowed to invite whoever they want to invite into the room, but normally it's just the command team. I have my teammates that are on the net as well. It's a very controlled audience, and we have that similar discussion. What is it that we can do for you within your brigade so I can further refine what we're going to look at? Eventually we reach the point where the CAT does the visit. So we will fly into that location. The composition is this. I have a colonel that's in charge of the team, and then underneath that colonel there are 2 subordinate battalion consultants. Each one of those an experienced lieutenant colonel. So they're peers. They also have a non-commissioned officer that's assigned with them, a master sergeant, and then they also have an ops officer. And that's the nucleus of really the team. That's actually the decisive point for us, are those 2 battalion consultants, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. And then we have other enablers that are in there as well. We have chaplains, we have behavioral health scientists, we have a variety of other folks that help out in the space. We normally get augmentation from SHARP and from EO. We bring in a chaplain, we bring in a lawyer, we bring in a variety of other enablers that are in there. But at its very core are these 2 battalion consultant teams. We arrive on the ground there. We start to message with the unit what it is that we do. So there's even like boards that you can put up should you decide to in your DFAC or whatever the case may be, depending on how open that command team wants to be about the CAT. But it describes what we are doing and what we are not doing so we can gain some shared understanding before we land on that particular location. There's nothing we're going to push on social media. There's nothing we're going to broadcast to anything. It's all very discreet. We'll spend about 10 days on the ground with that unit. And in that time, we're going to be doing a lot of focus groups, a lot of sensing sessions, a lot of one-on-one conversations, and we're going to be capturing. We're also going to be assessing the DOCs. We're going to be assessing other metrics that were pulled from that unit. We'll look at, for example, how awards are being handled within the unit. We'll look at what's going on in terms of maybe EO complaints that are occurring within a unit, and a variety of other metrics. I'm not going to get into the details. I'll just leave it at, we're looking at about, at this point, about 15 or 16 things that I think really help shape what is going on in terms of a climate. Re-enlistment, for example, is just another one of those things that we'll look at. Okay? And so we'll go through this 10 days, and as part of that, we'll reach a point where the battalion consultants have gathered enough information where they think we can start to boil it down to root causes. We're starting to understand a little bit better about those units. And much like they do at a NTC rotation or a JRTC rotation, what we don't want to be viewed as, we are not going to lead any AARs within the CAT. We're not going to lead any of the discussions. We are going to facilitate them, though. And so what we'll do is we will bring in that battalion commander that will sit down with our team, and we will share with them everything that we have seen. Just the battalion commander. Now, if the battalion commander wants to bring the sergeant major, just the command team. And we will share with them everything that we've seen. And we'll share with them not just the specific details, but how we assess the themes and the root causes to be. And that's something that I personally shape the day prior to this conversation occurring with the battalion commanders. And so we'll say, hey, battalion commander, here's what it is that we see, and our intent is that we want to show you potential blind spots, things that you may not have normally seen while you're in command. Because what we've also found is, you know, the vast majority of our commanders out there are, well, one, very well selected, they're very much qualified, and they're very good at what they do, but they don't necessarily see everything, and so we help them see those things. And we'll say, battalion commander, here are the things that we found. We ask that you prioritize what it is that you'd like to get after, and we kind of bin them. Here are the things that would take a little bit of effort, but you'll get a lot of return on investment, the easy wins, if you will. Here are the things that are going to be very hard and very long to fix, and then the return on investment may be small. So we'll kind of help shape it a little bit to inform their decision-making process. But the commander will prioritize what they want to get after. And it's normally like 3 or 5 things. And then we sit down with the commander and we say, okay, how would you like to get after resolving those things? And we will make suggestions and recommendations, but everything that we recommend is all doctrinally based. There's never a time when one of our consultants is shooting from the hip and saying, you know, when I was a commander, I would have done X, Y, or Z. There's no opinion in this, all right? It'll be doctrinally based. And we'll sit down with that commander and kind of shape thoughts and kind of help them think through what they might be able to do for solutions. The next day, that battalion commander will then sit down with their team and have a discussion that is similar. But that battalion commander is now armed. Much like you would do at a CTC rotation where we prepare a battalion commander for their mid AAR or their final AAR, we do the same thing with their team. And we've seen some really great practices there. We've seen battalion commanders that bring in not just their company troop battery commanders, but they'll bring in an assortment of the senior non-commissioned officers, and maybe even an assortment of junior enlisted. We leave it to the chain of command on how they want to approach problem solving. And they'll get up on the whiteboard in some cases and say, hey, this is what was identified. Do we agree with it? Where do we think the problems are at? And they start to whiteboard out what the solutions might look like. At the end of the day, what we're trying to steer them towards is a battalion commander, given their mission, given their environment, given the atmospherics within their command, given their schedule, they're able to lay out over a calendar how they're going to get after fixing what it is that they want to make better. That particular plan with those company commanders is then briefed to the brigade commander the following day. And then the day after that, a summarized version is briefed to the division commander, and that's where it stops. Who is invited to this conversation is left to the unit to determine how inclusive they want to be. We've seen everything where it was very, very tight. In other cases, they will bring in the experts from the division to also listen. All right, so that's kind of how it flows through. If we go to the next slide, I'll share with you just a few observations, and I admit that these are very much wave top. Reception, acceptance, and team building, and new soldiers. If there's one of the things that we found that is just recurring is how our Army onboards their soldiers. How do they receive them? Is it a first sergeant that goes and picks them up, or an NCO that just goes and picks folks up and they bring them in and drop them off at the barracks and, you know, we'll see you after the 4-day weekend? Or is it something that's much more deliberate, that really kind of embraces them and brings them into the team? We think this is very critical as one of the findings. You all can use your imagination in terms of the differences that you might achieve in terms of how you onboard your teammates. And that goes into how you integrate your newcomers. In a lot of cases, the reality is so much different than the perception that is out there. The reality is that unit may be very fairly handling how they do awards, for example, or how they do school opportunities for their soldiers. But the perceptions are biased, and the perceptions become the reality, and the perceptions will really taint what the climate is like within the organization. It can even come down to, you know, the commander seems to only promote these folks and actually preside over the ceremonies and doesn't do these ones. He's playing favors, that kind of thing. And it's nothing that the commander ever intended to do. It just happened to be what they were able to do given their calendar. And so that's how it worked out. But we help show those blind spots so they can see and understand the perceptions that are going on out there. It seems that a lot of times the LPDs, the OPDs, all that kind of stuff is the low dangling fruit, and when the tempo gets too busy, too hectic, it's the first thing that gets lopped off. And what we've also learned is that there is a deep craving nature with our soldiers, that they want this mentorship. They want this opportunity to talk about their profession. And sometimes those things get canceled. So we think that's absolutely foundational. Make sure that you hold on to those things. In fact, that oftentimes should be the anchor within the calendar, and other things you can look at potentially sliding or moving. I want to share with you an example about breaking teams to make teams. This is anecdotal, but we saw a unit that is, let's just say, very heavily encumbered with executing funeral details. And this is for retired soldiers within the community. It's been going on for forever, since the Army's been around. in this particular case, we had a unit that was doing 3 funeral details a week. The same people were doing 3 funeral details a week. And you know, when you're doing 3 funeral details a week, all you're doing is either you are preparing for one, you're at one, or you're driving home from one. And so that's all you're basically doing. So you're surrounded by folks that are mourning and sadness, and it's just not the most uplifting environment. And we learned that those funeral details are not necessarily maintaining unit integrity. It falls into the kind of borrowed military manpower, right? And maybe some of those individuals have other things going on in their lives and may not be the most optimal choice to be on a funeral detail. So it is this individual from this unit, this individual from this unit, you all form up, and then you're going to go do funeral detail. And when you do that, you're also incurring some isolation. And we know what isolation means in some of our more, well, it's within the area of suicide. And frankly, when I look at the cohesion assistance team, I often, admittedly, look through the lens of how we might reduce suicidal behavior, because that being the most drastic thing that affects our Army. But you think through what I just described, where you have kind of this ad hoc formation that was built with folks that don't necessarily know each other, may not be the best choice because they've got other things going on in their lives, weren't necessarily well screened, and now all they're doing 7 days a week basically is preparing for or doing some sort of funeral. I don't have any data to show that they're more apt to do something regretful, but you get the idea of what I'm talking about. And it doesn't have to be just funeral detail. It has to do with all kinds of stuff that we do out there. So we're breaking up teams. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about the learned helplessness. And this is something that I think, frankly, it's a little bit everywhere, but you consider some of the locations that we have across our Army. You know, not everybody has the luxury of living in Colorado Springs. So they're a kind of a picture is drawn for those soldiers, even when they come out of AIT, at the world that I'm in, and they say, hey, I'm going to go to Fort X, whatever that is, and automatically it has this connotation, it has this kind of perception of it's not the greatest. In fact, they already know all the little things that they need to be prepared to complain about, and I'll just put it that way, because maybe housing's been reported as having black mold, or whatever the case may be, you get it. And so they pick up this kind of internal culture, and they may have never seen any of the billets there. They have no idea what's going on with whether or not there's mold there, and the list goes on and on and on. But they've embraced this, and so it's cancerous within the formation. And so we're helpful in kind of showing commanders that, hey, we did a whole lot of interviews, and this is the kind of stuff that's going on out there, but I think your reality is you're not in that space. A whole lot of resources have been applied. It's a much better location. So your narrative may need to adjust, okay? So I'll go to the next slide. I know we got to wrap things up here. Just briefly, the ripple effect. Some commanders here recently, they will have, they'll receive, the brigade commander will receive the outbriefs from the 2 battalions that we look at, but they have 5 battalions within that formation, and they will immediately say, I'm going to make the assumption here that the themes are relatively similar. You other 3 battalion commanders, you now are encouraged or will produce a similar like plan for your formations, and even at the division level in some cases. And so we know that we're not going to, fix the world's problems through the cohesion assistance team by looking at 2 battalions at a time, every 2 months. But we are seeing the ripple effect, which we think is going to be very beneficial out there. Let's go to the next slide. All right, I'll close with this because I got 10 minutes left, and I do want to entertain some questions. This is one brigade commander's solutions. We would normally not share it, but this brigade commander is very proud of what they did, and rightfully so. When the cohesion assistance team went to go visit them, this was, I think, our first iteration on the solutions portion, and it was very well received, and this brigade commander embraced it and sat down with his team, and they built a series of programs to make themselves better. And so this is 310 out of Fort Polk, Louisiana. And so I would draw your attention down there to the bottom, the best practices, the prevention response. And so for you that are taking pictures, and you can by all means reach out and talk to this individual. We've had him speak with us a couple times. But these are programs that they embrace based off of the findings that we found, things that were blind spots to him, and as a result, the climate is improving there. The last thing that we do is after we come through on a visit, we do it. Walter Reed does a survey 90 days prior. We go do our visit, and 90 days after we visit that unit, Walter Reed follows up with a similar survey. And it's our way of kind of checking on the unit to see how things are going. Should we find that it's taken a different turn, then we'll reach out to the leadership and we will offer assistance again to say, hey, we're willing to come back out and work on a solutions piece with you, should you desire. We recently just did this. And in this case, the leadership had changed out. It was a new leader. And so it was actually a perfect opportunity for us to go back and just do the solutions portion, because they didn't get that portion the first time we went through. So we went back, we visited that unit, and then we'll follow up with them again in 90 days. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell of what the Cohesion Assistance Team is doing. We are newly formed with our permanent members that are here. I do have the commander here. I'm going to bring up Jason Bursma to help with any questions. But what I won't get into the business of is details of any particular unit that we're looking at. And lastly, on the area of data, a ton of interest on data and what that might inform. So as a way of disclaimer, that business is new for us in terms of what we want to collect. When I received the CAT, I didn't like the metrics necessary that we were looking at. I thought it was too much of a burden on the brigades. Brigades were having to collect data and push data for us. It took them days to do. That's not what we want to be. So we looked at the data, we talked to the experts and say, what is it that we really need to have and what is it that we can probably get rid of? And we did. We cut that 33 data point requirement down to about half, and it's been working a lot smoother. We will probably right-size it one more time as we hit the sweet spot, because we want to work much more closely with the G9 and the MNRA's office. And once we hit that sweet spot, we're going to leverage HQDA to help us out with how we're going to look at the data, what kind of correlation can we make based off of what we find, and how might that inform decisions in the future. So with that, I will pause for questions.
Morning, General. Todd South, Army Times. So kind of a two-part question. One, you listed a lot of the challenges or kind of like warning signs maybe you see when you're working on these assistants. So the reverse of that, what are some strong points you see in units where this is a common trend across different units? I guess that's the first part. And I'll just go with that for now, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. So let me first of all share with you that when we go look at a unit, it doesn't mean necessarily that these units have high risk indicators. It doesn't. Really, it's bottom-up refined now. So ACOM or within Forces Command, for example, they can choose whatever units they want to. And in some cases, they'll select a unit just based off of the availability because of training or otherwise, right? So that's an important note right up front. And we have looked at some very, very talented units because of that kind of bottom-up refinement. We looked at one, I'll share with you, in Hawaii that was superb. It was an excellent unit. And so it was really good for the team, because as the team went through, we said, that's a best practice, and this is a lot of things that we want to carry forward. I think that within those units, what I would share with you is not anything really different than what you're going to read in probably FM 6-22, for example, really. But at its very core, though, I think one thing that's very central is just their ability to communicate vertically and laterally. It is this constant shared understanding that they have within the formation. Junior soldiers have an understanding with some predictability on what's going to happen a week out, 2 weeks out, rather than getting notified of some sort of detail the day prior. It's when that kind of predictability is lost, then their home life starts to get really, under stress, and it starts to lend to a lot of other challenges out there. So those commanders that are really transparent, that are really good with communication, those tend to do a lot better. Go ahead.
Hey, sir. Major Mike McCrory from DLA Energy. Question for you and your team: as commands switch out, have you guys found there's a good time to come in? Is it in the beginning of a new command changeover, or is it one of those that you want the command to be there for a little while and then come back in?
I'll tell you. So we did the People First Task Force looked at 6, and we've looked at 6. So it's been 12 units that we've looked at thus far. So I don't have a whole lot of trend analysis there on that particular question. In almost every case, we had commanders that have been in command for about 6 months or so, about that period. Now, the one we just went and revisited for the solutions portion, that was a new commander. One might argue it's nice that you have us come in right after a commander is there so they have a better understanding of what needs to be fixed, if you will, and then they have the tenure of their command to be able to, take it to the next level. There's certainly an argument for that. But we're going to go to the units that are selected by the...
Okay, follow-up question.
Yep.
Sorry, so two-part. And then how quickly can your team launch on being requested?
Okay, it's a great question. So when we initially briefed Army senior leadership on the capability of the CAT, we said we can do 6 visits a year. And the reason why it's only 6, you think, how come you can't do 12? Well, at any given time, we're working with 3 different units. We're either preparing for a visit, we're doing a visit, and we're following up from a visit. So it gets a little bit busy in there. So we signed up, we could do 6, but we could surge 2 additional a year. So I often talk about it in terms of 6 to 8. Because, look here, at the end of the day, if Army senior leaders say, hey, we need to go take a look at a unit, guess what's going to happen? We're going to go take care of that unit. We might have to reshuffle the deck. Go ahead. Yeah, good seeing you. No, you're not. You want to do this?
Appreciate that. Hey, great topic. So, as you start to capture trends, how's that getting fed back into pre-command course, such as a captain level, not only the officer courses, but the NCO courses, so they start to see some of this valuable information?
Yeah. So that's the absolute end state, right? Is what you're getting after. It hasn't occurred yet. Okay, so it's we do have some data, and we are doing the trend analysis on that. But that's exactly what we're after. Once it's mature enough, it's at that point. That's the reason why we are partnered. The reason why this is all within TRADOC is because we can work laterally right now with the Center for Army Leadership. So that happens. They're part of the team, frankly. That was one of the early requests that we have. So they are actually sitting there and helping to do some of the coaching. But that's the intent behind that. That's the bigger picture is what does this mean now for not only our doctrine, but they also have oversight of BCAP, CCAP, SMAP, all of that. So how do we do that better? And then what do we do even at the local level for company commander, first sergeant courses, all of that? How is that helping the institution itself? Because this has got to be multi-pronged, right? We can't just go out and pull the dipstick at these little locations. We've got to institutionalize this across the Army. But that's how it'll work. It'll work laterally within TRADOC, and then we want to bring in, it may get presented at like the Army Professional Forum or Senior Leader Forums and things like that. Last question probably. I got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rick Porter, G1 ForceCom. I just wanted to go back to the selection of the units. How are the units selected? We talked about before during the transition that they would be selected through the ASRC process to establish predictability, not to disrupt training or mission. Is that still the same besides the units that come forward and asking you to come visit?
Yeah, so early decision by the Army G3 was, hey, we need to synchronize this thing because we're concerned about things like rearm and everything else. So we got pulled into the ASARC process, and that's where that occurs. So the Army Service Component Commands and Forces, everybody that's a player in that all gets synced out. The units have already been identified for 24, and we have a rough draft of what it looks like for 25. So that's already been mapped out. You can shift a little bit, though. I mean, if hey, we don't want to change A to B, then that's perfectly fine. Okay, I just got the Heisman, the 30-second card came up. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming out and listening to what we're doing, the Cohesion Assistance Team. I appreciate you, and we'll see you on the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next presentation at Warriors Corner will be DUSA, Army 2030, Reconnecting to the Golden State at 0950.